Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we have a 2022 Chevrolet Colorado, and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Demco Tabless Base Plate. There's going to be 5 main components to flat towing your vehicle behind your RV. The first is going to be your base plate, which is going to attach to our vehicle. Next is going to be our tow bar, which is going to attach the RV to the vehicle so it can pull it safely down the road. Next is going to be your braking system, which is going to allow the vehicle to brake on its own as the RV is stopping itself. Next up is our diode wiring to send signals safely from the RV to the towed vehicle so that you can let others know what your intentions are on the road. And lastly are going to be your safety cables. Your safety cables are there in the case of an unlikely disconnect. Your vehicle won't travel down the road. It'll stay safely behind your RV so you can get pulled over and get the situation handled. This is what the base plate's going to look like when you've got everything hooked up to the back of your RV. The safety chain loops will come integrated in the tow bar, which is really nice. These safety chains that come with the Blue Ox Avail are about as big a hook that you're going to get, and you can see they still fit. They come out, they're a little tight, but that's nothing to worry about. It will feature a nice thick black powder coat finish. I like how it's a textured powder coat finish, so it will help to resist that rust and corrosion over time. Very thick steel, sturdy construction. It'll mount right where your tow hooks were. Now I will say you are going to have to trim a little bit out, but overall it's not a super messy install. You cut out a little bit of this in order for them to fit because these are going to be bigger than your tow hooks. But when you're not towing, you'll simply pop this pin out and pop this pin out. Slide your bar off. You can either leave this in, most people will take them out, you twist, turn it, and this is all that you're left with. So it's a nice clean look. Honestly, when you're standing up, you can't really even see them down here. They do come with some rubber caps that you can put on there, keep the road grime out of that hole. But overall, I think it's a really clean look. The installation is going to be a little bit more involved than some of them that we install. But after you're done with it all, I think you're going to be very happy with the look of it. Now, as far as timing for the installation of how long it's going to take you to install this, it is kind of involved, so I would at least give yourself a day to install the base plate, but I would also recommend to install all the other components that you need to flat tow your vehicle while you're doing this, because it'll be so much easier. We'll have to take the fascia off. It'll be so much easier to run all the wiring and all that stuff with that out of the way. With that being said, I would give yourself at least a few days, 2 to 3 days to get all this stuff installed. If you're experienced in installing stuff like this on an automotive, you might be able to get it done in 2 days, but 3 days definitely if you're a novice. With that being said, let's go ahead and take it inside the shop and show you how we did it. To begin our installation, we're going to have some fasteners on top of this plastic cover, on top of our radiator that we're going to need to remove because our front grill and everything's going to have to come off. We're using a T15 Torx bit to get this done. In our wheel wells, we'll have 6 more of those T15 Torx screws that we're going to need to remove. We're going to work up to this fascia here because we're going to need to remove it. So that's why we're taking all these out, because we're going to have to access a screw behind here to be able to pull it off. Now we've pulled back our fender liner, and there's going to be 3 7mm head bolts that are holding this portion of our fascia to this bracket. We'll remove those from both sides of the vehicle. Now underneath, we're going to have 2 of these bumper supports. Just helps to support the fascia. And we're going to have a 7mm bolt that we'll have to remove from both sides. And finally, up underneath, we're going to have 2 15mm head screws that we're going to have to remove. Let's give it a tug, make sure everything's loose. We're going to remove these fog lights now since we could access them easier. It'll just make taking the front fascia off a lot easier. So we'll just unplug them. You just need to pinch in on the blue tab and it'll allow you to pull it out. Now underneath our bumper, you'll have two holes, one here and one about 16 inches away on the other side. And you'll have two 10mm bolts that we'll need to remove. We'll slide our extension up in there. Just like that. Before we pull our fascia off, we like to put a little bit of blue painter's tape on both sides of our seam here so that when we're taking it off and putting it back on, we don't risk the metal fasteners hitting either side of our paint. Now with the second set of hands, we can take our fascia and pop it off. There we go. There we go. And we'll set it in a safe place. To get our frame rails ready for our base plate, we're going to need to take these tow hooks off, and we'll take the two 18mm nuts off each side. Now these tow hooks will not be reinstalled, but I recommend holding on to them if you ever decide to take your base plate off and put it back to factory, then you'll at least have them to put back on. Now we're going to prepare our frame to be able to install our brackets. We'll take these large tube spacers, slide it up and over the frame. We're going to come out this hole. Just like that. And you'll notice that the end of it will be flush with the hole, just like that. Then we'll take one of the longest bolts that comes in our kit. You'll have two of them, and this is what they're for. Slide it over and through that spacer, just like that. Now we can take our 3.5-inch bolts, which is your next size down from the largest bolts. We'll slide this bracket up and over our bolt. If it falls back in the hole, that's okay. We'll line these up with our old bolt holes for our safety chain loops, or for our toe loops, with a flat washer on them. When installing this hardware, you'll want to put blue Loctite on all the bolts so that we ensure the safety of the hardware not moving. The Loctite will come in your kit, which I think is really nice. Slide this over. Followed by a lock washer and then our nut. We're going to leave this hardware loose until we get all of our all the nuts on, because otherwise it can stiffen up a little bit and make it harder to insert all the bolts. Now making sure that our spacer is still lined up with the hole, you can see it through our bolt hole. We'll move this bracket back till they line up, and then do the same thing, put some blue Loctite on it, and then a lock washer and a nut. Now if your brackets right here are not lining up flush with the frame, you'll have to shave down part of that bracket where our toe loops came off of, and then it'll allow this to slide over and be flush to the frame. Finally, we'll take our shortest bolt that comes in our kit, a flat washer, line it up. This hole is going to line up with that hole, and these shorter spacers. Thread it in. This is why we leave everything loose, so that we can get it all lined up. Then we'll take a lock washer and a nut and put it on the back side. This is going to be very difficult to see because it's inside this tube. After installing the passenger side, we'll want to torque all of our hardware down to the specifications and the instructions. Now we need to put our safety cables on. We'll loop the safety cable up and over the frame, and then we'll take the D-link, which comes in our kit, put this side of the cable on this. There's a couple different ways you could do it. We just recommend being behind this body mount, so that way in case anything were to come disconnected, it's going to grab this body mount and not something else. And then we'll take the other side of our cable, run it through the other side of our D-link, just like that, and then tighten it up. At this time, you would reinstall your fascia and bumper. You would also need to trim out the tow hooks. The holes are just not quite large enough to be able to accept the height of these bars that'll come out of it. So what we're going to do is, and you should too, if you need to install anything else regarding your flat tow system, like your braking system or your diodes, anything like that, now would be a great time to do it while you have the fascia off. So we'll go ahead and do all that stuff and come back and show you how we trim the fascia. Before we get our fascia mounted back on our car, we're going to talk about where I had to trim in order for it to fit around the base plate, and how we mounted up our 6-pole wiring bracket and our breakaway switch. To start with the breakaway switch and the 6-pole wiring, what we did was we just took the license plate cover off, and you can kind of see it around here. If I spin it around, we took the license plate cover off, this plastic, took it off. There's going to be some aluminum rivets that you're going to have to drill out. Use some bolts and nuts to run it through our bumper to firmly attach it back to our bumper. And then we drilled a hole for our wiring. This, we drilled a 1/2-inch hole so we can fit them all through there. We'll also be running our breakaway wires through there. We took our bracket, took some stainless steel coarse thread screws, ran them up through. We were able to hit the inside of the bumper, so this is nice and sturdy. And then for our breakaway switch, we needed a little bit better backing, so we used a aluminum plate that we had lying around here. You could also use a large fender washer on the back, and then ran a bolt through and attached our safety cable, or our breakaway switch. And you just want to make sure that when you pull this pin, that nothing on here is going to move. This is more than sturdy enough for the use on the front of our car. Now with an extra set of hands, we'll take our fascia and put it back on our truck. Make sure everything is sliding over what it's supposed to go over from the factory. Get all our pins lined back up. Now we've got our fascia back up. What we found out is we're still making a little bit of contact here. What we're gonna have to do is we'll cut out a smaller notch here, and then on the back side, there's a metal bracket that's actually hitting. This bracket here has a little bit of a slope on the front side of it that's hitting our base plate. So that's what's preventing this from making contact, where we need to bolt it back up. So we'll take this bracket off, which is just 2 7mm bolts, one here and one up behind here, and then we can trim that. We'll come back and show you how we trimmed it. We got one bolt here and one bolt here. We're just going to take this bracket off. You can see here where our bracket was making contact with the bottom of our base plate. So we're going to cut this piece out, and then that should give us a lot more clearance to be able to push that fascia back on. With our bracket cut, we can now put it back in place and then test our fitment. For trimming the front of this, we're going to just go ahead and trim down to this ridge here at the bottom, and we're going to have to trim a little bit more on the top. See where this comes up here? We'll go up and over about the same amount, about a 1/2 inch. Clean that up a little bit, and then we can push our fascia back on. And one last thing we're going to add before we put our factory hardware back in is we're going to add a spacer, just a washer in here. If you have a normal washer, you want to probably use 2. We have a pretty thick conical tooth washer. Put it between the plate we just cut and the bottom of our bracket here. The reason for this is if we don't do it, there's going to be a lot of pressure pulling up on this bottom valance, which is going to make it want to separate from here. So that's what we figured out on the other side, so we'll do it the same on this side. You also have to pull the fascia back as you put this bolt in. Well guys, hopefully this information helped you decide whether or not the Demco Tabless Base Plate is right for you and your 2022 Chevrolet Colorado.